Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Brandon Hughes always believed his life was under control. A regular guy, hardworking, devoted to his family and his own principles. Married for over 12 years to Olivia Grant, a woman who, in everyone's eyes, was simply perfect. Intelligent, charismatic, with an enchanting smile capable of lighting up any room. They were the kind of couple neighbors admired, friends praised, and relatives used as an example. At least, that's what Brandon believed, until that day. It all started on a completely normal morning, at least, it seemed to be one. Olivia was rushing around getting ready to leave. She packed her bag, checked some documents, grabbed her laptop, and in the middle of the rush, casually mentioned she'd have a very busy day. She said the company was pushing deadlines, that an urgent delivery would require her presence all day, and that she'd probably get home later than usual. Brandon, suspecting nothing, just nodded, wished her a good day, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, and went back to organizing things at home before starting his remote workday. But when Olivia left, something strange lingered in the air. Brandon couldn't exactly explain what. It wasn't suspicion, concrete evidence, or even a real fact. Just that uncomfortable feeling deep inside, the mysterious intuition you can't explain but just won't let go. Maybe it was the rushed tone of her voice. Maybe her eyes avoided direct contact when he tried to look closer. Or maybe it was the overly hurried way she moved, like she wanted to escape. He tried to ignore it, tried to continue his morning normally, checking emails, organizing tasks, replying to messages. Until almost an hour after Olivia left, Brandon noticed something on the kitchen table. Her phone, there, forgotten, vibrating silently, the screen flashing discreetly. For a few seconds, he stood still, just watching the phone vibrate. Then he read the notification that appeared on the locked screen. A short, direct message that felt like a knife to his chest: "Can't wait to see you today." That meeting room, just ours. Brandon froze. His blood seemed to stop too. For a moment, he thought maybe he had misread it. Maybe it wasn't for Olivia. Maybe it was a mistake, a silly coincidence, even an inside joke. But when he looked at the sender, the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. Derek Simmons. Olivia's coworker. A familiar face. Ironically, someone who had already sat at their dining table, eaten barbecue made by Brandon, held a beer while laughing at jokes told in the backyard, pretending to be a friend, pretending to be loyal. Shock gave way to an uncomfortable emptiness. His hands began to sweat. His heart raced. Brandon stared at the phone like he was holding a bomb about to explode. His instinct screamed that he should leave it there, pretend he hadn't seen anything. But another part insisted there was a much bigger truth hidden there, something much worse than he imagined. He took a deep breath, picked up the trembling phone, hesitated for a moment. Looked toward the door, as if expecting Olivia to walk in suddenly and catch him red-handed. But she didn't come back. So he unlocked the device. Typed in the password he knew by heart. After all, they had always trusted each other. Or so he thought. As soon as he opened the gallery, everything collapsed. Photos. Dozens of them. Some videos. Screenshots of conversations. All stored there naturally, as if this had been part of Olivia's life for a long time. In fact, it had. Brandon just hadn't known. The first images alone were enough to weaken his legs. There were Olivia and Derek, holding hands in the car, hugging, smiling, kissing in the company parking lot. And worst of all, photos from a motel in the neighboring town. The same Olivia who always claimed to have business trips, important meetings, and unavoidable happy hours was there, in the arms of another man. With every tap on the screen, more proof emerged. This wasn't something recent. It was something built, nurtured, secretly maintained, like two teenagers living a forbidden romance. There were voice messages. Brandon needed courage to listen. When he pressed play, it felt like the ground opened beneath his feet. "You make me so happy. I never imagined feeling this again. I want to see you today. Today isn't enough, but it's all we have now. If I had the courage, I'd leave everything just so we could truly live this." And Derek's reply completed the blow to Brandon's chest: "We deserve it. I just hope you make that decision soon. I'm here, waiting for you." Brandon's face turned pale. His whole body trembled. His breathing became heavy, difficult, as if the very air had thickened and become harder to breathe. He tried to stay calm, not break anything, not scream, not throw the phone against the wall. But the impulse was there. Because in that moment, he understood that his entire life, everything he believed in, everything he had built, simply ceased to exist. He sat down on the chair, covered his face with his hands, and stayed there for a few minutes, trying to organize his thoughts. But they came disordered, tangled, violent. While he tried to understand, flashes of his own life invaded his mind like shards cutting through his thoughts. Memories of birthdays, trips, Christmas dinners with family, plans, conversations about having children, dreams built together, all stained, dirty, false. He got up, walked back and forth, pressed his hands against his head as if that could stop the thoughts hammering inside him. But they didn't stop. On the contrary, they became clearer, stronger, crueler. He started remembering the times Olivia said she was tired, the weak excuses, the last-minute cancelled plans. The calls she answered in the car, away from him, speaking softly, looking around, saying it was work. In that moment, he realized, it wasn't just betrayal. It was the lie. The fact that while he was giving everything, doing everything to maintain that house, that marriage, that life, Olivia smiled at another man and gave her best self to someone else. And Derek. Derek pretended to be his friend, shook his hand, looked him in the eye, shared laughs and jokes, while behind his back, stealing the most sacred thing a man can have, trust. Amid all that pain, all that collapse, something inside Brandon began to change. The sadness, which came like a heavy, suffocating wave, began making space for something else, a coldness he had never imagined carrying within himself. A cruel clarity. And for the first time, he understood. Understood that he wasn't facing a simple betrayal. He was facing a choice. A decision made by two people, conscious, premeditated, planned. And Brandon, staring at the phone in his hands, murmured to himself, his voice firm, barely recognizing his own tone, "You made your choices. Now you'll learn the price of that." Because at that moment, he knew, this was far from over. That was only the beginning. Brandon didn't waste time. He transferred everything to his computer, photos, videos, conversations, audio files. Nothing escaped. Each detail became a named file, dated, organized like a timeline of a carefully constructed lie. A painful, humiliating, disgusting sequence. When he finished organizing everything, Brandon looked at the computer screen and knew exactly what he had to do. He considered waiting for Olivia to arrive and confronting her directly, but realized that wouldn't be enough. The lies were too big, too dirty, to end in a simple argument between four walls. So he opened his email, created an anonymous account, and started preparing what, for many, would be the worst day of their lives. He wrote a direct, brutal message, leaving no room for doubt. It started like this: "You need to know who the people around you really are." Then he revealed the whole truth. Attached the images, the photos that spoke louder than any words, hidden kisses, hands held, loving looks. He also included the audio clips, the same ones that tore his chest open the first time he heard them. He was meticulous in selecting the recipient list: Olivia's family, Derek's family, mutual friends, co-workers, bosses, and especially Carla Simmons, Derek's wife. He scheduled all emails to be sent simultaneously. And when he pressed send, it felt like he had detonated a bomb. There was no turning back. The effects began almost immediately. At the company, Olivia received the email in the middle of the workday. As soon as she opened it, she froze. Her eyes widened, her hands trembled, and the shock was so great that her body gave out. She collapsed to the floor, unconscious, in front of everyone. Upstairs, Derek also opened the email during an important meeting. The images appeared on the screen, and instantly, he completely lost control. He tried minimizing the window, closing the laptop, but his colleagues' eyes were already fixed on him. The HR director stood up, looked directly at him, and said simply, "Come with me." The scandal spread like wildfire. WhatsApp groups forwarded the emails. People whispered in the hallways. Clients called demanding explanations. Some even threatened to cancel contracts. At Derek's house, the impact was equally devastating. Carla opened the email, saw each photo, listened to each audio, and for a few seconds, felt like her entire world was collapsing. She screamed, cried, threw the laptop onto the couch, and walked around the house in shock while the kids watched, frightened and confused. Brandon, on the other side, silently observed everything. His phone vibrated non-stop, messages, voice notes, calls. But he ignored them all. He just took a deep breath and thought, "So this is what you wanted to hide, huh? Well, now everyone knows." When Olivia was called into the director's office, she entered with a pale face and a trembling body. She knew exactly why the photos, screenshots, and audios had spread like a virus. Seeing the email circulating among co-workers, managers, and even clients was enough to understand that her life had ended right there, in that exact place. As soon as Derek entered the room, she shot him a heavy look and, without hesitation, snapped, "Is this real? Claire, tell me you deleted those photos and conversations. How could you have been so careless?" She tried to breathe, hold back tears, but couldn't respond. There was no response that could fix this. The director looked at both of them, took a deep breath, and got straight to the point. "Do you understand how this harms the company's image? Do you realize this affected clients, partners, and even our institutional reputation? What you did goes beyond shameful, it's incompatible with any ethical standard." He placed a printed sheet on the table. The image spoke for itself. HR added, coldly, "As of today, you're officially fired from the company. And frankly, after what we've seen, there's absolutely nothing left to discuss." Derek pressed his hands against his face, turned his body, and before leaving the room, threw one last cutting line at Olivia, "Fix this with your husband, because whoever leaked all this was you." Then he slammed the door behind him. Olivia left the building with shaky legs, a tight chest, and a churning stomach. She drove home with trembling hands, barely able to grip the steering wheel. The fear of what she would face seemed to crush her from within. Opening the door, she found Brandon standing in the middle of the living room. His gaze seemed heavier than any shout. It was the look of someone who no longer felt anger or sadness, only contempt. She took 2 steps forward, put her hands in front of her, and her voice came out weak, broken, "Please, let me talk. Let me explain. I swear." Brandon took a deep breath, interrupting her without raising his voice, "Pack your things and leave my house." Olivia froze. Tears came, uncontrollable. "Please, Brandon, let me talk. I beg you. Don't do this." He shook his head and replied, cold and firm, in a tone she had never heard from him, "You made your choice. Now live with it. You don't live here anymore." She stood frozen, her whole body shaking, unsure whether to cry, beg, or simply accept that this was the definitive end. And in that moment, she realized, everything. Absolutely everything was lost. The divorce was signed weeks later, without arguments, without prolonged hearings, without attempts at reconciliation. Brandon handled the process surgically, coldly, decisively. He ensured everything was handled objectively, as if finalizing a contract, as if closing a cycle that no longer existed. Olivia signed the papers with trembling hands, feeling each letter like a knife slicing her skin. Reality hit when she received the official document. There it was, in black and white, the end of the marriage. She spent weeks lost, dragging herself through guilt, regret, and deafening silence that filled her days. Shame was physical. Going to the grocery store, walking down the street, looking at her own reflection, everything hurt. She lost friends, lost the respect of her own family. Even her parents, who tried to support her, distanced themselves for a while. Messages went unanswered. Invitations disappeared. And the only company she had left were her own thoughts, her own loneliness. Meanwhile, Derek plunged into chaos. He was kicked out of his house the same week he lost his job. Carla blocked him on all networks, threw his bags onto the sidewalk, and made sure all relatives, friends, and acquaintances knew the man she lived with for years destroyed her family. The kids, who until then saw him as a present father, started treating him like a stranger, a visitor who did something unforgivable. He tried rebuilding, knocked on doors of acquaintances, looked for work. But the story spread so fast that doors closed before he even touched them. He ended up living in a small rented apartment, with used furniture, a mattress on the floor, and a void pressing down on his chest. Carla, determined and focused on her children and her own peace, moved forward without looking back, as if Derek had ceased to exist. And to her, he had. Months later, trapped in the same suffocating routine, Olivia realized life wouldn't stop just for her to fix the past. She sought help, started therapy, dove into courses, kept her mind occupied with anything that would pull her out of that hole. In the middle of this process, she met someone, a man who, like her, carried scars. Divorced, father of a little girl, someone who knew exactly what it felt like to watch his life crumble. They started talking, built a friendship that, over time, turned into something more. And unlike anything she had ever experienced before, this time she learned to value what she had once wasted. Years passed. Brandon distanced himself from everything, sold the house, moved cities, changed states, disappeared from social circles, groups, contacts. He lived for a time as if he wanted to be invisible. And in this decision to step away, he found his own freedom, rebuilding his life from scratch. Many years later, at a family party hosted by Carla's niece, a familiar face walked through the door, and for a few seconds, silence filled the entire room. Brandon arrived, different from the broken man everyone remembered. He was another man now, lighter, more confident, happier. Beside him was a woman. With her, 2 young children whose smiles proved he had started over, and well. Everyone was surprised to find out who the woman was. An old friend of Carla's. Someone who, in the past, tried to warn them, open their eyes, alert them to what was happening, and who, at the time, was ignored, rejected, treated as an interfering gossip. Brandon politely greeted a few people, smiled at others. His gaze briefly crossed with Derek's, who stood alone in the corner of the party, holding an empty glass, trying to seem invisible. Derek lowered his eyes, unable to meet that gaze. The silence was uncomfortable. Olivia, sitting farther away, watched the scene with a mix of shock, regret, and pain. She saw the man she swore to love forever now happy, fulfilled, with a new family, while she held her own loneliness in her lap. Time, once again, showed, in the cruelest way possible, that choices have consequences. That those who plant lies reap loneliness. That those who betray destroy not only the betrayed but also their own lives. And finally, that regardless of how long it takes, life always finds a way to show that those who destroy another person ultimately destroy themselves. Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.